think the girls with their nails done now. Girls with their nails done. I think the girls with their nails done.
Hey guys, welcome to a wonderful, wild, wonderful Thursday night here. I have Frank Fear filling in for Joey, and I have two special guests that I met a week ago, Brian and Kristen Roberts, and we're going to talk about the ins, the outs, recruiting 101 when we come back in about 15, 20 seconds. So we're back, and I'll tell you what, Frank, I've been excited about this interview. How about what are you thinking?
Well, it's where it's at. We really appreciate Brian, and we really appreciate you two with us, and we're looking forward to tonight.
So, Brian and Kristen, I want to just, we were throwing darts about, January, trying to figure out this NIL thing, trying to figure out recruiting, how it's changed. And it's like whispers in the wind. We don't have a pulse of what's going on. So, I'm not just going to jump into it. I want to talk a little bit about your, experiences, but do you feel you're prepared for not only you? Now, let's preface this. You have one son who's a freshman and one that's a senior. So were you prepared for, now Jake is the older boy, right?
That's correct.
So were you prepared for Jake 4.5 years ago, 5 years ago to go through this process?
Well, so Jake, when he first came out of high school, so he was a 2020. And so that was really before NIL became a thing. Mm-hmm. You began to hear a little bit about the potential of something coming. But his first time through, that was pre-NIL. And, he went through his recruiting process, and then he played 3 years at North Texas. And then there was a coaching change. And, after that third year, Jake just decided that, I'm going to try my luck in the portal and see what happens. And so, he hit the portal. We talked a lot about it beforehand, and we talked that morning right before he did it, and he said, I'm going to go ahead and post this. And when he posted it, you're sitting there and you're just like, I wonder what's next. And the silence is deafening there for about 30 seconds, and then it seemed like a minute later, Jake texts and there's a school that's already contacted him, and it just kind of took off from there with phone conversations. I think we had talked late that night, and I think he took like 38 calls that day. Mm-hmm. On the first day.
38 calls.
38 calls, yeah.
And Kristen, I want to ask Kristen a question here real quick, and then we'll get back to you, Brian.
Yep.
Are you the good cop or the bad cop?
When it comes to just and parenting?
No, with the recruiting. With just this type of situation.
Like
going into the portal.
A little bit of both. Mm-hmm. I kind of, Jake was old enough, where I felt like he was old enough to make that decision and he knew what he needed to do. And I was just there to, be a sounding board and be supportive and, kind of, once I kind of got a feel for what these coaches were like and meet them in person and then, so I would say just kind of, I tried to say as little as possible in the beginning, so kind of let him take the lead on it.
So Brian, 38 calls. Now, were they all did they come in chunks, or was it just ring, 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 ring? I mean,
yeah, that's
crazy. So that's 2023, right? 2023 time frame?
That was after, yes. Yeah, that 2023 time frame. And so, that day, talked to him that night. I mean, he had been on the phone solid, watching film, talking to coaches. But that was the first time that both of our boys kind of went through that process together, because Nate was already our youngest. He was already going through his high school recruiting. And so it was pretty cool to watch those two. Nate, he would work his way into those conversations. I'd see them both watching film with whatever coach, they were on with. Then, Kristen and I, we would, be on some of those calls and get a feel for the coaches. But, he played in the bowl game that year with North Texas. And so his window was cut down. So we basically had about a week after the bowl game to, go on official visits and, make a decision. So honing that, I think he ended up 20 plus offers, that first portal experience. And then, then it quickly just moved right into official visits, because we wanted him there for the spring semester to enroll in January and go through spring. And so those OVs were really our first experience with NIL. And it was a strange experience, because, you hear about it, but we didn't really know anything about it. And your first experience is talking with head coaches and, staffs about that. And, it's kind of an experience. How do you approach this? And they just jumped right into it, as we honed that list down. And, it was kind of new water for Kristen and I.
I remember that first day he had so many calls, because he was home, because it was after the bowl game. So he was home, and I remember him on the couch taking call after call after call. And by the end of the day, he was like, I got to cut it off. Like, I've had enough that day. But so it was good. I mean, it was great. We're super thankful. It's just it going into it, you didn't know what was going to happen. And then you're like, oh, thank goodness, so it went good. So.
Well, what's interesting about, I was going to say, what's interesting about what you're saying, it was new for you, but it's new for the universities too, because this whole NIL came quickly, emerging from first a court case settled out in California and then went state by state. And so the schools there was no template that the NCAA had that the schools were following. So I would imagine you had your son and you had different experiences with different schools. And I'm not sure, did we talk about what state you're from? That might be helpful to the.
No, sir, we hadn't covered it yet, but we're from Norman, Oklahoma, just south of Washington is really the community we live in.
Very good.
And so, really with the NIL stuff, it was working with those staffs through that process. Jake, he was, like Kristen said, mature, played 3 years. He knew what football-wise, what he was looking for, and he was pretty specific to that. He stayed really true to what he wanted in that experience. And I have to say, like for Jake, the NIL portion of it wasn't the driver there. He made his decision, to go to Baylor based on the scheme and the coaches. And then, NIL was down the list there.
That was the question. That's like a question you don't want to ask, but you want to know. So that was great that you answered that, because I wondered, what that was on the list as far as where it fell. And it appeared that, from talking to you earlier, it was not top of the list. It was just kind of one of those things that checks the block, right?
Yeah, I would think, Jake is a real relational guy, and that's important to our whole family. We want our kids with good people first.
Yep.
And, then probably scheme. At North Texas, they ran a lot of inside zone. He wanted to play in a wide zone scheme to get that experience. And, that's what Baylor based out of. And, the more we talked with them, the more, we became interested in it, and just the relationships built from there. And, I would say NIL was on down the list for Jake. And, I think he made his decisions based on the right things, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. So you told us that it was around a week from flash to bang, from him pulling the trigger 38, 30 something offers, 38 in the first day. That's crazy. And then how did he whittle down to just a handful to take visits? I mean, can you share anything like the thought process there? Or?
Well, I mean, logistics were one, because we had a window of about 4 days. I don't know, 5 days maybe. It was not very much time to go to back to back to back. And so, if you went to a Tennessee, that's in. I think he really. I don't want to speak for him, and Kristen, you might have it.
Right.
I felt like he wanted to stay in the region, and and then that was another thing that weighed in there. So, relationships, scheme, playing in this region, I think those were all important things. So that eliminated some of the schools, right off the bat. But he had a lot of great opportunities.
Now, Kristen, I have a question for you. Do you think because Jake had that experience, it made it easier for Nate to kind of charter those waters?
I definitely think so. I definitely think he kind of looked at that and thought to himself, like, this is what I'm going to want, in my experience. And I do think for both of them, it was a lot about relationships. And so I think that's why Jake chose Baylor. And I think that Nate being able to see, how that relationship was created with Jake and, his previous coaches, how he was at UNT, and then how he made the decision to go to Baylor. I think he saw that, and that, let him know, okay, this is kind of what you're looking for. And, and that's exactly what Nate wanted to. I mean, that was the most important thing, is that relationship that was built. I mean, are these coaches taking time to get to know you and your family and your girlfriend or whoever, So I definitely think Nate definitely benefited out of it for sure.
Frank, do you have a question? Because I have one to follow up, but I want to see if you have anything.
Well, Kristen began to answer the question that I'm going to ask, and that Jake went to Baylor. Did Nate end up at Baylor too, or somewhere else?
No. Well, Nate is actually a senior in high school, so he's not quite a freshman yet. So he's a senior in high school, still at Washington High School. Going to have his last semester. He'll graduate early in December, and then he'll go to Ohio State. He's committed to Ohio State.
That's what I thought when Shane and I talked earlier today. Well, that's wonderful, because they're both one has already played Power 5 football, and the other is going to play Power 5 football at a contending school. That's what has been the experience for Jake at Baylor. Not so much just the culture, but the football experience. Coming in, has it gone the way he thought it would go? I know he's not here, but from your perspective, what would you say are some of the highlights of your older son at Baylor?
I think that the relationships that he had with the offensive coordinator, who was also the tight ends coach, and the assistant tight ends coach, I think he had an awesome relationship with both of them. I think he got to experience a totally different culture, whether, there's great things about every culture, then there's negatives about, every culture, so he got to experience that. And then, obviously the friends that he's made along the way, and then just the development with the scheme that they run, the different offense compared to UNT, way more complicated. I mean, he was going through at breakfast one Sunday morning after a game, and he was talking about the plays that they would run and how long, like, just to memorize each one. And he went through one, like, oh my gosh, that's just one play. So it was a lot more complicated and probably more pro style, I would think, which is a great experience, So now that he's at OU, he's back with Coach Luttrell, who was at North Texas, the head coach at North Texas. He's the offensive coordinator now at Oklahoma. So it kind of came full circle. So when, his OC at Baylor was let go, and the assistant tight ends coach was let go, he decided, I might want to go back with Coach Luttrell. So that's kind of like how that all came about.
Oh, I see. Very good.
Very good.
I was just going to say what.
Yep.
I was just going to say what position. I'm not sure we talked about that.
Tight end. They're both tight ends.
Very good. Okay. Sorry, Brian. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. No. And then with Jake on that second transfer, so when he was at Baylor, had a great season. Outcomes, overall, weren't what we would, anybody wanted. But so they made a move, made a change in offensive coordinator, and they had that one transfer rule in place, so you could transfer one time, and so Jake was, all right, this is where I'm at. We're going to go through a spring, see how it goes. Then he would graduate in the spring, and then he would have the ability to transfer if he liked. Well, the NCAA, they took down the one transfer rule, and so that opened that back up in December, where he could transfer again immediately if that was his preference. And so, with the OC change there at Baylor, he went ahead and entered the transfer portal for a second time, and then ended up at Oklahoma again, like what Kristen said, with Seth Luttrell there at Oklahoma, which is about 15, 20 minutes up the road from where we're at. So it's nice having him around.
Do you have a chance to kind of reach out to Coach Luttrell before, or you're not allowed to do that? I mean, I don't know what exactly the rules are, but.
Yeah, you're not really allowed to do that. But we've got a pre-existing relationship with Coach Luttrell, and so once Jake hit the portal,
right,
that started pretty quickly, and,
right.
And also Nate was getting recruited by OU, so it was.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what I was.
Yeah.
And that's what I was saying. I was going to get to that. So because Jake has had this experience and he's a known commodity, and I'm saying commodity like. He's known that,
yep.
And he has a little brother, because I have two boys. It's like, oh, you have one. What about this one? And they're probably like apples and oranges, but they see these two big kids that are playing the same position. And I think, from a coaching standpoint, if I was a coach, I would probably approach them the same way. But being different kids, they probably receive input differently and react differently. Can you talk a little bit about that? What the differences and what their lists look like compared to each other, like not schools, but the checklist, like what's important to them when they're looking at a school.
I would say, okay, I'll go first. I would say Jake is very big on relationships. I mean, he would base a decision on a relationship, and that's a huge thing for Nate also. But at the same time, he is very business-like, and he is about his business, and he is going to look for the development. He's going to look for the potential that that program has to win championships, whether it be conference championships or national championships, and the development that the previous tight ends have had. I mean, he's going to look at everything, like that as more of a business outlook, whereas Jake will put the biggest priority on the relationships. So, and that sometimes can take you in different directions, but they're all good,
So Frank, do you have a question? Because I have one that I'd like to save towards the end, but if you have a question, shoot, or I can just go ahead with mine.
Sure. I was going to add, both of you are very articulate, very thoughtful, measured. Have you been approached by other parents or by organizations since this is really all very new and fluid, to talk about the experiences you've had? Because it's not just with one student, you're going through it now with a second son. Have you been asked to speak to other groups or individuals about your experience?
We haven't yet, and that's something that Chris and I talked quite a bit about, because we've been through this, and we've also got a third kid. So Riley, our daughter, plays volleyball, and so she's at the University of Central Oklahoma, and so all three of our kids have gone through the recruiting process and have had different experiences. And so even with our experience that we've been through, with each of the kids, we learn something new almost every day. And so wow. I'm thankful for, Kristen and I both have an athlete, we both were collegiate athletes, and, we had our own experiences, then the kids, and I'm thankful that, Kristen and I, we have that communication between us, but we always, welcome the opportunity to share the stories with others and what we've learned. We're by no means experts, but we're very glad to share what we've learned along the way.
Mm. And there's a book there.
Yeah, for folks who don't know, they're
oh man, yeah. I mean, seriously, there is a book there that you could also compare it to your own experiences, and then you went through it with 3 children. That's amazing. Yeah, both of you are a gold mine of knowledge and perspective on a very complex and constantly changing circumstances that I would imagine with some parents, they must be really perplexed. So good for you.
Well, thank you.
It really is it's changing all the time. It's amazing how fast, and it's just going to continue to change. Like, as you all know, I mean, it's just constantly,
And I would say that it's important to learn from others and their experiences. I mean, when Jake first, was coming up when he was a junior, and, he showed, some potential there, and he showed the interest to play at the next level. That recruiting process, it had changed so much since Kristen and I had gone through it. And, we were really trying to glean information from other parents that had gone through it. And I didn't even know what Twitter was at that time. And, it's just like you learn so much so quickly. And, now we look at it, 5-6 years later, and that's just a big part of our life. And Kristen and I, we've had hundreds of conversations about recruiting and just experiences. So glad to be on here today.
Great.
We enjoy it. That's the thing. Like, I really enjoy it, even as a, as a
you can
mom,
tell that.
It's a lot of fun. It's just interesting. And it's like, what's this guy going to do? Or what's, where's he going to go? Or how long you think he's going to be there? So.
That's great.
So
where did you?
Real quick, I just want to ask this question. So one of my questions is, if were there some schools or some relationships you're like, man, that seems like a great opportunity, and then he went in a different direction? With both of those boys, probably that happens with each of you. But did that happen? You're like, oh, he's going to go left, and he went right. I mean, I don't want to talk about schools, but I'm just saying. I mean, were there some that you're like, oh, that's awesome?
Well, we talk about, okay, so with Jake, we were probably more involved in that process on a daily basis, and like just free flowing dialogue. And part of that was because of the time frames and just, working down that path. And so I felt like, we kind of had a better idea with the direction there. Now with Nate, like he, coming up, his first offer was the spring of his freshman year. So his recruiting got kicked off early, and, he's got, I think almost 40 offers, sitting now going into his senior year. And so his recruiting process was very active, and we had a lot of discussions, and, we try to weigh out the different variables. But like Nate, while he's very business focused and, doing the right thing, as far as his development and the opportunities ahead, he's also kind of a free spirit. So, and he's going to make his own decision. So Kristen and I were probably more, along the lines of just helping to guide, the process and answering questions as he had it versus trying to direct him. And so really that made for an interesting ride, really. So, I mean, there were some twists and turns along the way, and I think there were some surprises. Kristen, I don't know your thoughts.
Yeah, to answer that question, I do think there were times where I'm like, oh yeah, like he's gonna do this or he's gonna do that, and then it would kind of like, yep. So you're like,
kids, I get it. You're like, oh yeah, this is what's gonna happen. I'm like, what?
Right.
I had this figured out. I've known you for all these years. What the hell are you thinking?
Yeah, I remember Kristen one time. She's like, we're talking about it in the living room, and like Nate's in his room, and he's like, she was talking about, how could you expect to know like what decision he's going to make? I mean, he's just like, he's right there in his own room, and we don't really know where he's leaning or which direction he's going. It could be 15 minutes up the road or 20 hours away. So it's been an interesting ride.
So go ahead, Frank. You had a question. I interrupted you.
Well, I was interested in you both played collegiate athletics. Where did you go to college, and what did you play, the two of you?
We went to Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia. Go Herd. I played volleyball, and Brian played football.
How about that? Very good.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I'm from Wheeling, West Virginia.
Wow.
They saw a guy with a WVU hat in the airport, and they're like, they didn't run away,
Right. Right. Like Brian said, we grew up in the blue lot, tailgating growing up. So it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The great Northern Panhandle.
Yeah, it's great.
Yes.
Really, I'll tell you what, Ogilvie Lights. I live over towards Slippery Rock, so I'm not far from there.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, but I want to ask you something else. Having two boys in there and brothers, and I guess the sister might be talking a little smack too, but do they give each other heat? Like your conference sucks, or come on, give us a little bit of insight. Do they talk shit?
Oh, yes. I think it's getting worse as they get older too.
I love it.
When they were little, so Nate, he's just been the little brother, and so he just fell in with Jake and his friends so he grew up competing with those guys no matter what they were doing. And I was like, well, maybe we should put a basketball goal out in the driveway, and so we did. And I mean, it wasn't even like a month later, and I was thinking about maybe I should take that down, because there'd been about 15 like different really instances. Like Nate would come in, he'd be bleeding, it's just like those guys, Nate just grew up competing. And I think Jake's always been a great big brother to him, and just it's been interesting to watch their relationship evolve, not just as brothers, but also sharing experiences in the recruiting process. And I think we see, although they're competitive, like they're very protective of each other, and they do share those experiences. And like Jake, although he's at Oklahoma, and Oklahoma was really that was one of those schools right there at the end for Nate, and we have some great relationships there, and that's a school we really appreciate. And Jake loves Oklahoma. I'm sure Jake would have loved to have had him there, but he wanted the best thing for Nate, what Nate thought was the best fit for him. And like Jake didn't try to guide him down a path. He was there to answer questions and tell him about the programs and, what he thought was great. But it was just interesting to watch those two interact throughout.
So this time you answered a question I don't even have to put on my list now, but so look from the outside looking in, I'm thinking there's some programs that are apples to apples that are just very comparable. Is that true at the top, at the tippy top? And is there a huge drop off between tier 1 and tier 2 schools? And tier 2 schools, I'm talking, not a particular school in general, but you know what I'm saying. There's a certain drop off you see from programs that just don't have the money. Yeah. So what do you think? Do you think there's a huge drop off, and were there apples to apples, or are they all different flavors and there's no comparison?
I think we've had the opportunity to see a lot of great programs, and we've through Jake's process, through Nate's process, I think we've seen programs at all different levels. And coming from playing at Marshall in the mid '90s, we had a great program there. But like even the group of 5 schools that we would play when Jake was at North Texas, and Jake as part of North Texas, I was always impressed with the resources that those guys had around them compared to what we had even just as recently as the 90s. And then, as you start to look at the Power 5 schools, the power conferences, the elites. It's just unbelievable what the resources and the programs and the opportunities that these guys have access to. It's just there's so many great things available to these guys. It's quite honestly, it's a challenge to keep it straight. And so we would take notes, and Nate would keep notes on his phone, and just to try to keep our facts straight, because sometimes that can run together.
And there are sometimes I have to
but when you're talking, go ahead.
There are some, you walk, it's like looking at houses, and you don't even have to, just because of the level that it's at. And then you're thinking, okay, you've been to other places that are a little higher, have a little bit more of this, or a little bit, just more money in general throughout the program, or whatever, however that they have their facilities put together. And you might walk into that program and that facility, and you're kind of like, this is just not going to cut it. You know what I mean? And it's like one of those things you just kind of know right off the bat, and you're like, yep. And then it kind of just, but it's good to visit. Yes. So it's pretty much, you're kind of like, okay.
Was there anything that just blew your mind? You're like, oh my gosh, how do they have that? Like I went to a house one time, and it had a fake door. It was like it looked like a shelf, and you went up to like another bedroom. So,
Right. Like there's some definitely some programs you're like, that's incredible. I think the ones that impressed us the most were the ones that emulate the NFL teams, that do the things that the NFL teams do, like scanning the feet and, molding their cleats, and just things that like this, and 30% of the NFL teams only use it. It's not even like all the NFL teams have it. It's like they want to emulate, what they do. And okay, we had these types of injuries, so we're going to stop this. We're going to, get the cleats that are molded to their feet, and we're going to scan them the day they come in. They are going to go to that foot scanner, and they're going to sit on those foot scanners, and they're going to have their cleats made for them as soon as they start. And it's just things like that,
And I would say too, like Kristen was saying, everybody's got great facilities, and it's it's pretty consistent there. The differentiators are the strength and conditioning, the nutrition, and then the prevention side of it now. And what's the day to day look like, and how do they support these guys in their daily life, and how do they develop them on and off the field. And so to us, those were the things that really began, that plus relationships really began to differentiate the programs.
Right. And how, you walk in, and how they all relate, how the coaching staff relates within each other, and, with us as a family, and just things like that. Like, what's the whole mentality? Are they down to earth, or are they kind of like, oh yeah, we're so-and-so, like, you should be able to be here, or are they just like,
there were programs like that. There were programs you got in and you felt like kind of swarthy and dirty, like, like they think their shit doesn't stink, and you're like, guys, I'm not feeling it,
Right.
So try and look at each other like,
well, no, he probably doesn't notice that stuff as much as I do. I'm really like in tune with that kind of stuff, because it just, and so whenever they're down to earth and they're welcoming, and they're a huge program, you're thinking, this is like such and such school, and they're acting like they're UTEP. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It's not, and it's so great, because you're like thinking they're just down to earth kind of guys, and they're humble, and they're, they're just happy to, to be there, and happy that you're there, and welcoming, and it's great, but then some are just kind of like, not as much.
And I would also add too, and how they communicate. And it was interesting to watch the different schools and how they approach that. Some would primarily, that all of them interacted with Nate, regularly. And then some would just, focus their communications through me. And others would really take the time to build a relationship with both Kristen and I. And to us, those things matter. And because, moms, they're a big part of this process. And, it's, that nurturing nature of a mom and just that sense that a mom has. Like, I would miss things, and Kristen would, she would just like, I would have my list, Kristen would have her list, and it was always interesting to see the things that she had noticed. So I think the communication side of it, the communication piece with Kristen and moms in general, that's very important in this process.
I think so. And there's a teammate on Nate's team that is already in college, and his mom said the same thing, because they would all talk to her husband because he was a Pro Bowler, and they just all thought, well, he's the football guy, and so they all would talk to him. And the one team that built the relationship with her, that's where he's at, and it's just really interesting. And the one that has the best relationship with me, that's where Nate's at. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of like, you as a mom, you have to, I mean, we're a big like factor. I don't think some of them realize that. And, if we trust that person, we know we have a good communication with that position coach. And we know once they get there, we're going to be able to know what's going on with them, because it's not going to be easy. And so it's just kind of interesting. Like some of the coaches won't look at me in the eye, and then some will all address everything to Brian, or they'll only text Brian, and that's fine, but it's kind of like, I don't even know them, I don't even hardly know them, so, but that's all good. Just the way it is. I would say, like, these schools, like, throughout that process, you're looking at, like, where is the best fit for your son or your daughter, and like, they become an extension of your family. There's a lot of trust that you're extending to these staffs with your kid. Like, it's a kid that you raised and you nurtured. And, I mean, you want the best for them, and you want them around good people. And you want to really look past. You want to see deeper than just the cell. Like, there's always those things that the hot points of each program, but like the deeper, like, what are they like as a person? How do they communicate? How, what's it going to be like, if, your son or your daughter has a need late at night, like they're relying on this person and they're 15 hours away from home. Do you have that level of trust in them to take care of your kid? Right. And it's going to be hard. And what if they have, what if they broke up with their girlfriend, or they failed a test, or, whatever it is. So.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, they're not grown ass men yet.
Right.
Jake's pretty close, but I know a lot about adolescent males because I was in the Army, and the male brain at 25 just takes a shit. And it's not until they hit second puberty they get some common sense. So, you know what I'm talking about, Frank. Right. You taught school for a minute. But yeah. So my last question, and you guys have been great. And so, if you had you each have to go, and I'll go Brian first, and you can alternate if you'd like, so you can think of the answer. Yeah, if you had to give a parent a checklist and just pick 3 things to make sure that school had, and everybody's queer for the gear. I like shoes, I like backpacks and that kind of stuff. When I was in the Army, I liked the backpacks, but I'm talking like, what are some key things that parents should key in on, that, or some red flags that you might have seen? 3 things each, putting you on the spot. I know this is tough.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I want to give a thoughtful answer. I'll share some thoughts. I don't know if it'll end up being 3, but I would say first, go into it with an open mind, and don't be realistic. I would say, be realistic with the skills and abilities and the levels, because I think, like we talked earlier in this conversation, we saw great things in the Group of 5 programs. There's so many great schools out there. Mm-hmm. I would encourage a parent not to just get locked in that it's D1 or bust, because there are a lot of great, like, big, Power 5 schools, but there's a lot of great programs in the Group of 5, and then also at the FCS level, Division II. It's just like, to me, I would share with a parent, I think it's most important to find find your kids fit. Let them find their fit with whatever program that is, and don't get too locked in on what level that is. I would say there's a lot of variables that go into finding your fit, but one is being realistic and don't limit yourself. I would say, also, look at the relationship, ask the hard questions. Don't be afraid to ask those hard questions, because you know what? There's no question that's out of bounds. Honestly, you got to look for the best interest of your kids, and trust your gut. Like, if you have that feeling, don't sit on that. I mean, talk with your wife. Talk with the kid. But it needs to be shared, because this is a hard process, and there's a lot of different factors out there to weigh, and it's you gotta, at the end of the day, you gotta make a decision, and really, you have to make a decision based on what you know at that time. One thing that we've learned is college football is very fluid, and things are continuously changing. And, you can what if these things to death. Like, you can what if, and you can try to force rank. And really, when it's come down to it, it's that gut feel, it's that relationship. I would also just say, just take a look at, have the kid define what's important to them, and try to find that program that best fits that mold.
That's a good point. Have your son or daughter define what's important to them. That's really good. Kristen, what were you thinking?
Right. And I want to add to that, is because, when we talk about everything, I know we talk about how we view it, but I want everyone to know that this really was, Nate's decision, Jake's decision. Like, this is like, I just basically want to sit back, listen, give my opinion if they want it, if they don't. But we kind of knew Nate's personality was a little different than Jake's. Jake's going to talk a little bit more, whereas Nate is going to be more reserved. So what we did was we got like a huge Post-it note, and every so often we would go down the checklist and we would put the things that were important, relationship with the coaches, the facilities, the, distance or game day experience, drip, anything that they would, things that are important.
I'll tell you what, those shoes that scan your feet, all those Post-it notes go out the window. It's all drippy drip. It's like, I know that Ohio State has those little lounging chairs with the swag and underneath, and you put your helmet up. It's pretty.
It really is. And the one thing, we realized that with Nate, he liked that process. Like, it wasn't like us drilling him about something and asking him a ton of questions. It was just him being able to, like, put it up on the wall and write the things that were important to him, and then kind of rate it from 1 to 5. And that was what we did, like, over and over again. It wasn't just one time. It was like continuously. And so, that was a big factor. And also for parents, when I would watch certain teams and how they were with the media, how in interviews, how professional were they?
That's a good take, Kristen. I didn't think of that.
I think about, I look at Ohio State players, and they're so professional. They're very, very well spoken. They think before they speak, and they're very, they're not, just like out there, like, saying stupid things. They really think. They're very thoughtful. And I think that comes from the culture that they are a part of, and just from what we've seen. And so that part of it, I really like that part, because I want him to become that type of man when he's a professional in the professional world. I want him to be like that with other people as well. When he's addressing anyone on the street, a homeless person or whoever, like I want him to have that same empathy and that same compassion for everyone he talks to, so I think that's a big deal. And what kind of, do they really focus on their mental health, like counseling? It's tough, for anyone, like, do they have that going on for them? Do they talk about that? Or, just anything, like OU has Soul Mission, and it's an unbelievable, Jake's going through that, internships, things like that, outside of just football, so although, you know, that's why they're there is football, but there's so many other things that these programs do for these guys, you know, and boys, you know, so, and we're super thankful for the opportunity because, you know, I just think there's going to be so many things that they learn so hard, but so rewarding, you know, so, but I would say to parents, just try to, and, you know, it's like every kid different. You have to know what makes that kid tick, and they have to know what makes them tick. And once that kid realizes, your child realizes what motivates them and, you know, is going to help them be successful, then that's really a big part of the process, you know, so.
Another thing I would share with other parents is just be forgiving as well. I mean, you're going to make mistakes, and, you know, that happens. This is not an easy process. We're very thankful for each and every opportunity. And, you know, we realize, like, our children, like, they've had unbelievable opportunities and very blessed, and we appreciate it. But, you know, as you're going down through this process, like, you have to be forgiving with yourself and each other. It's just, it can be stressful at times. It's a lot of fun, but mistakes will be made, and that's okay. It's like, but if you make a decision and you reflect on it and you feel like, man, that's maybe not the right fit, or I've got this question, don't sit on that. It's an important decision. You need to talk about it, and don't be afraid to change directions.
And also big thing, take your time, because there's going to be some coaches that will reveal themselves to be something they're not. And also, if you hear that person is interviewing for other schools and you know that's true, that's a red flag. I mean, you know, by the time your child gets there, they won't even be there, you know, so.
So I think that when you picked up on that, that's a good point. Did you pick up on that during the process, and you started to watch for that? Did something happen that you're like,
you kind of had a feeling about it, and then it just kind of became more prevalent, like the further you went along, and then you're like, okay, you know, maybe I wasn't crazy. That was, you know, but you kind of let it play out, you know, so.
And it was interesting too. Some coaches would be, you know, some you would hear like on Twitter, or you'd hear through different means, like they've been interviewing, or you might hear from other coaches that other coaches are interviewing. But those that stood out to us, I don't want to speak for Kristen, but those that stood out for me were those that would call us and let us know, you know, hey, you may hear that I did interview for this position, and this is why. And you respect that.
Yeah, you don't. I tell you what, nothing's worse than someone shoveling dirt on someone else. You know, like, come on, man.
Right.
You know, like, that's sleazy. You know.
Right, and then. Right. And like some will start doing it a little bit, and then they'll start doing it again, and they'll do it again. And it was like, that was their only tactic. It wasn't like
passive aggressive.
Yes.
Death by 1,000 paper cuts. I hate that shit.
Right. But I would tell you, we met so many great people throughout the process.
Right.
And it was just unbelievable to sit there and think, you know, you're here and you're sitting in this coach's office, you know, and just the time that they gave our families to answer our questions. We really appreciate the opportunities that our kids have had and those experiences. So.
Now, you don't have to answer this. Okay. This is like a bonus question. This is, you know, if you were to do an honorable mention of a couple programs other than the programs your kids are at, what would you just say you were most impressed with? It could just be they were nice, or they had a nice sauna, or just throw us some name of like a couple programs. You're like, man, they exceeded my expectations, you know, in some way. And it doesn't have to be like a banger program, but just someone's like, wow, I was impressed. They were not what I thought they'd be. Kristen.
Okay, I will say Penn State's weight room was unbelievable. It was like brand new, like $69 million. I think they said it cost. It was insane. Like it was just insane.
It wasn't the creamery. It wasn't the delicious ice cream at Penn State.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay. Another thing about Penn State was the wrestling match we went to. That was incredible.
Yeah.
one of the best things of the whole recruiting process, and the creamery, the ice cream
I was going to go to Penn State, but I went down to Morgantown. It was my second pick, and there were guys on a yard drinking and leg wrestling, and I'm like, this is my home.
Bingo.
They're leg wrestling. They're nice, you know.
No burning couches.
That was there too, but the people were nice, and that's why I came to Morgantown. But anyway,
people were amazing.
Yeah, super nice. Yeah.
Yes.
So Penn State, Kristen, is there another one that comes to mind? So the weight room.
Penn State, yes, weight room. Oregon, like there were some things about Oregon that were pretty impressive. Like the track at Oregon was incredible.
I was just out there last week. I was in Corvallis and Eugene. So yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
I will say that indoor facility that Oregon's about to build is going to be something that's going to reset the standard.
Oh yeah.
Although the standard wouldn't need to be reset because it was 106 on Tuesday, and then the Monday was 103. So it was but it was dry. It wasn't like as muggy as it was Saturday here in Pennsylvania. But
yeah.
Right.
I'll tell you one of the coolest experiences throughout the process for me was Nate and I were at the Tennessee-Alabama game when Tennessee won there in Knoxville, and just the environment was electric, and just like we were sitting shoulder to shoulder, and you have to lean over to talk to each other, and just how just the environment, that SEC environment, just the Tennessee fans, but they stuck out to me throughout the process.
And you're never going to unhear Rocky Top. When you hear it, you get goosebumps. You know what I mean? It's just it's like if you ever get in a fit. I told someone who's going to West Virginia to do something they'd never been. I said, if you get drunk, get in a fist fight, just start singing Country Roads, and everything will be cool. You know?
I just I was watching like Alabama operate down, getting close. They were in the red zone, getting close to the end zone, and just the pressure of the crowd, and it was just unbelievable, and how it was just always interesting to watch how they operated under pressure there. So that environment, Tennessee, I would say also the night games at Oklahoma.
More Oklahoma,
stand out.
Yeah, Norman, Oklahoma,
stand out to me, and the way the Soul Mission program that Oklahoma has, how they prepare those guys for life after football, is really impressive. And those are a couple of experiences and a couple of things that stuck out to me.
Yeah, I always say there's a list of teams I would cheat on, West Virginia wise, and I was just LSU was really interesting. I guess it threw my stomach because I just ate my face off when I was down there watching a game, and then Oregon and Oregon State are kind of interesting out there. But I love college football. And I worked at West Point, and we went and, worked every game for 2 years. So you got to travel a little bit and see that. And the Army-Navy game, of course, is a lot of pageantry. Old Army football is it's just the charisma. It's just the crackling and popping of the historic, the guys from the 40s. But is there any other school that comes to mind? Because I'll tell you what, Kristen, when Nate's playing in Happy Valley, you guys are going to have to get some of that Penn State Creamery ice cream. So,
oh my goodness, yes, for sure.
The Notre Dame tradition, I would say, you can't help but be moved when you walk into that place. It's just, it touches you, and that stood out to me as well. That's a great program, great staff,
for sure.
Love Marcus. But their fans are obnoxious.
Definitely.
Yeah, you gotta let me get some hand sanitizer. I'm Catholic. I could talk shit, but I'm just saying,
I'm Catholic too. I know, and it's oh my goodness, that's a tough crowd though. You would think they were terrible, I mean, the way they're just so rough on their team. I'm they're
mean drunks. I want happy drunks like LSU fans, Auburn fans, Alabama fans Ole Miss fans are happy drunks, but they get dressed up, and I'm not down with the getting slacks and collar shirts. It's too freaking hot down there for that shit. But I'll tell you what, guys, it has been a wonderful show. Frank, can you believe these two have this much knowledge and that we've just touched on what they know about the recruiting process?
Well, this very impressed. In fact, as I was listening to both of you talk, we could have, the headline for this show could have been excellent parenting with a focus on recruiting for their sons and daughters, because what you've just given us, I think, over an hour is really a mini course in really outstanding parenting. When you use the word guidance, some people, what does that mean? Well, that's what you did. You provided a frame of reference, a guidance, a safety net, but the decision wasn't yours. And that's one of the things that, we as parents struggle with all the time. I know when our son was growing up, you want to be there to support, you want to be there to guide, you want to be, I had this experience, but you can't make the decision for people, because part of growing up is not only making decisions, but living with the mistakes that, maybe they're not mistakes, but other choices that you may have made. So when I said earlier about a book, what you have learned, and more importantly, who you are, both of you, Kristen and Brian, just fantastic. I want to thank you. I do have one last question, though, and it's this. And I was talking with a colleague earlier today who played major college basketball. And we were talking about the experiences he had in the recruitment process. This was years ago, where you would say there were integrity issues with respect to the coaches, the offers. So to flip the coin in terms of what Shane asked, this time not mentioning any schools. The coaches have different personalities. But did any of your children experience what you would call, my God, we can't go here? There are integrity issues either with the coach or the program, because it's highly competitive, obviously.
I would
Come on, guys, it's creeper vibe. We got to get it. Let me hear it.
We met a lot of great people through the process, but there are, everybody's different. Everybody has different personalities. And I think you're always just analyzing, observing, watching. And, it's just, you get a feel at times, and that may add up. We would never eliminate an opportunity just based on one experience. But if you feel that over and over again, then that's probably a place you don't want to look any further at.
Right.
And because you do have to begin to hone those lists down, and and focus in on those schools where you feel like there's a natural fit. But you do have those experiences, but I would say by far and away, it was much more on the positive side at each school.
That was very clear. And we all knew that wasn't somewhere that they knew that wasn't somewhere they wanted to be. Both boys.
It didn't take long. It doesn't take long, right?
One program,
oh my gosh, we just got here and I know these people. Yeah, I get it.
Right.
Well, go ahead, Chris.
One program, Nate knew he didn't want to be a part of that program because of things like that, go on in the program. And I gave him credit. I didn't go there. Brian and he went there, and it was just kind of like, okay, good for you, Nate. I didn't know he would be like that. He was. So it was really a cool thing to know that he was fine with that,
Absolutely. And I would also say, Nate was originally committed to Notre Dame, and that was early in his process. And I'll tell you, when he because he felt it was important, we supported it, that he needed to call those that had offered him, that he had been in close contact with them, and communicate that to them. And those are grown up conversations with grown men, and this, these are young kids going through that process, and the vast majority were very positive with that interaction, and they played the long game because like we said, college football is very fluid.
Mm-hmm.
But there was, one or two that didn't like, and they probably were more emotional about that than, I would have liked to have seen. But you know what? That told us a lot about, those individuals. And, that just reinforced. It was interesting. That mom sense, Kristen, those that reacted that way, Kristen had identified in the process. It's like, hey, I don't know about them. And it was just an interesting observation to see that prove out. But, people will tell you a lot about themselves when they face adversity or something doesn't go their way, when it gets tough. And, that was an interesting process for us that told us a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Thank you.
Thank you guys for having us on. We really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're going to wrap up the show, but don't jump off. I'll talk to you after show a little bit. And guys, I'll tell you what, if you like the show, like and subscribe it. If you don't like it, like and subscribe it, share it. We're here every Thursday around this time, 8 o'clock. Frank, Wednesdays, tell us about your show.
Well, we have a program that is called Mountaineer Locker Room Then and Now. And the reason it has the subtitle is that we talk about today, but we also talk about those Mountaineer players and programs and coaches of yesteryear. Last night, and Shane listened in, we had a player who played in the Sugar Bowl in 1954. He's over 90 years old. And we had a hell of a time with him. You see, Gene Lathy is his name. He's down in Dunbar near Charleston. And I think he had fun. We had fun. And then we had a daughter of another player, Bill Underdonk. She's from Huntington. And she talked about her dad and the experience. And it's amazing because a lot of those players are still close after 50, 60 years, the old band of brothers. I was going to say one thing, too, about Nate is going to Ohio State, correct? That's correct. Where he's going to go? Well, yes. You gotta let me know after he's there for a year or two, if he is able to actually say the word Michigan. Because I'm a WVU alum, but I spent my academic career. I was a college professor and an administrator at Michigan State, and people think, boy, the West Virginia Pitt rivalry is really something. Ohio State Michigan is almost armed conflict. If I picked up the paper or heard on the radio, there were troops at the border. With each state invading the other. And Ohio State, they always say the school up north.
Yes.
They don't say Michigan. It's hate. Absolute hate. Oh, and now that Michigan won the national championship. But Ohio State will come back. No question. But wow. Now that's going to be a great experience because there's so much history in that rivalry. Yes, oh my God. So much. Is. Yeah.
It's very interesting. We watched a show on it the other night. It was awesome about the history of it. It's amazing.
Watching the eye get dotted at the halftime show.
Yeah.
That guy is it's like Neo in the Matrix,
Yeah. You know what you can do? You can tell Nate this, because what you don't want to do is to get into anything that'll send you to jail for punching someone. But if he gets nasty stuff from a Michigan fan, here's a question he can ask. Those days back there with Woody Hayes and Bo Schembechler. How many national championships did Bo Schembechler win? And the Michigan fan will, and before they answer, Nate will say, 0. They didn't win one under the great Bo Schembechler. And boy, they get really pissed off, because Woody won a ton and Bo never won one at all. So, it'll be a great experience for him. Yeah.
We'll let him know.
Good luck.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on, and stay on. I'll talk to you right after the show. But guys, we're going to wrap it up here. You can see me tomorrow night on the Friday show. We're going to be on at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and we're going to talk West Virginia sports. last or 2 weeks ago, before I had to go out for work, we talked about West Virginia stock on the rise. We're going to talk maybe about the Big 12 being the stock that's on the rise. So tune in tomorrow, and thanks for being here, and we'll see you soon.